One of the programs that we've recently hosted that aligns well with today's discussion is our Social Justice Issue Forum, our first ever session focused on food insecurity and food justice. So we're going to play a little clip for you highlighting that video, and then I will introduce today's panelists.
So I think a key word that we are focusing on is empathy. We want to build a sense of empathy among our young people so that they see the world as bigger than just themselves. They care about what's going on around them. This particular forum is focusing on food insecurity, so understanding what food deserts are and what support systems are out there for them to make a difference on that issue.
With the current times that we're in, they could go back into their communities and help to really replicate not only the concern for it, but the action around it and what they as young people could do to help to support that.
It starts out with the idea, being able to see your neighbor as yourself, to be able to see an issue that's happening around the corner as your issue and not someone else's. Those are really important things to me, and I'm hopeful that as I talk today and as they listen to the several panel, that they'll get a glimpse of that.
Most kids think, well, oh, I'm a kid, I can't really help, and we can honestly do like a lot here and help with food insecurity, how to like work to get where you want to be.
Join the conversation because we're going to talk about a lot of cool things today. Things that you probably thought about, things you probably have not thought about.
4-H has continued to serve me throughout my high school career, into my college career. It really made me a conscious adult. It opened my eyes to see the world through compassionate eyes. It gave me the power to believe in myself, believe in my voice, believe that I could do something in the world.
Great. Thank you for sharing that video. So that's just a little snippet into what 4-H does and how we elevate youth voice to make a difference in community. And as it relates to today, focusing on issues like food insecurity across our state and our country. So thanks for sharing that. We also want to recognize Thomasina Rogers with Black Girls Grow. Thomasina is the founder of Black Girls Grow. She's a gardener and a mentor for Black girl empowerment. And after nearly 40 years as an attorney, she directed her time and energy to her passions, right? Isn't that a wonderful thing to be able to do? And that's gardening and the empowerment of girls and women. She has a YouTube channel called Black Girls Grow and soon to be launched website, The Queen Bees. So we're going to show a little piece of a video from Thomasina's program now.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Black Girls Grow, where growing is our passion, and our motto is, when Black girls grow, everybody wins. My name is Thomasina Rogers. I have been growing vegetables and flowers since I was a little girl, planting seeds in the corner of my mother's garden. Right along with the plants in the garden, I grew too. All too often, Black, brown, and other girls must push past stereotypes, prejudices, and stigmas that deflate their hopes and dreams and keep them bound in the shadows of their full human potential. So, Black girls, brown girls, every girl, let's get gardening and let the magic of the dirt inspire us to fly over the rainbow.
Can't wait to hear more from Thomasina on that wonderful project that she's provided leadership to. And then our second panelist for today is Siobhan Terrell of the Black Church Food Security Network. Siobhan is a community planner, community organizer, and food system planner in the Black communities. As the deputy director with the Black Church Food Security Network, Siobhan manages a local market that steers thousands of dollars in support towards Black farmers and small business owners. Through her work, she advances local self-reliance in the food system. So we are so excited to show you a clip of what Siobhan's project is all about.
And for the past decade, I have been working with African-American congregations and Black farmers. We do this under the banner of our organization called the Black Church Food Security Network. We were born in 2015 in the middle of the Baltimore uprising. While demonstrations and protests were going on all over the city, we were working to advance food justice because we recognized that no justice, no peace, also links to a piece of the pie and power over your plate. Baltimore City government backed up off of these communities. Nonprofit organizations backed up in the middle of the uprising. Support that we needed was just not there. We realized in that moment that charity had failed us. And it was time for us to do something for ourselves. I started calling around to my farmer friends and my pastor friends. We brought church and farm together to create a Black-led food system. Utilizing the resources of our churches, we began to feed ourselves. What started out just at one church now has spread across the country. Historic African-American congregations all over the United States have linked with the Black Church Food Security Network in order to advance food sovereignty in our community.
The Black Church Food Security Network specializes in partnering with historically African American congregations for community empowerment. We do this through our two major programs, Operation Higher Ground and the Soil to Sanctuary Market. Through Operation Higher Ground, we help churches expand or establish community gardens. The Soil to Sanctuary Market is where we partner with Black farmers to sell fresh produce in church-owned dining halls, parking lots, and multi-purpose rooms. So yeah, we transform church spaces into mini farmers markets to sell produce directly to Black communities.
We believe that you can't get a handle over your health until you have power over your plate. We believe that it's time for us to do what we need to do for ourselves and our community.
If you are connected to a church, then head over to our website to join our church covenant partnership. And if you are a farmer, then join our Black Farmer Directory so we can connect you to niche markets within the Black church community.
I love it. I hope you can feel the power and energy in our virtual space today. We have some amazing voices who will share their wisdom and experience with you today. But before we dive too deeply into questions and getting to know our folks a little bit more and their programs more, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Maeoe Parker with Ma Parker Associates. She has some fun get to know you activities that we're going to start with to get to know our panelists a little bit better, and then we'll dive into some Q&A. So I'll turn it over to you, Maeoe.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nia. Good job in introducing these panelists. I am Maeoe Parker, and I'm former head of fisheries in this country, a fish and wildlife biologist, and have the opportunity to work with Maeoe and had a chance to speak at one of your annual meetings. So it's a pleasure to be here. So let's just see if we can get to know you all a little bit better. I'll ask you a few questions. We are talking about food after all. So first question, fish or chicken? Fish or chicken? And I'll start with you, Thomasina. Fish or chicken?
Fish for sure. Fish for sure, yeah. Do I have to give an explanation or how I cook it? But just fish of any sort. But don't get me wrong now. The yard bird is one of my favorites too. I love chicken.
Chicken, all right. Your choice, Siobhan. Fish or chicken?
Oh, definitely chicken. I am originally from the Deep South, and we used to fish on a weekly basis every Sunday. And my auntie owned a fish house, so during the summers, I would spend time with her at the fish house, and having that experience of eating fish every week and watching her clean fish every day, I just can't eat it anymore. It's no longer a part of my diet. So I am all chicken.
All chicken, all chicken. And then I was going to ask you fried or baked, but that might be unfair to each of you to ask that one, right? Fried or baked. So I'll go to the next one. Dinner or lunch with your most admired person, dead or alive? I had a choice between Oprah or Gail. I chose Oprah in hopes that she'll bring Gail with her. So your turn, dead or alive, dinner or lunch with one of your most admired persons?
Well, I would have to say, this person is no longer with us, and I'll talk a little bit about her later, but Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a warrior for justice down there in Mississippi. Most and she's somebody who has insights into how growing interfaces with justice. And she was just a person who didn't have a whole lot of education, but she was a real warrior.
Real warrior. Okay, your turn, Siobhan. Dead or alive, most admired person you'd like to have dinner or lunch with?
That's a hard question. So I would say I would choose dinner, and I would actually choose to have dinner with the very first ancestor from Africa that touched down on this soil. And I would love to ask questions around like our culture, our practices, our diet, like foods that we were eating, different medicines that I could use today.
Wow, like okra, okra is one example of that. Okay, my last question. I know, Thomasina, you are a pianist too, a concert pianist, and classical music and everything. So if you're eating, which song would you be singing or playing? Celebration or I Will Survive?
Ooh, I Will Survive. That's an easy choice. I love that song, and I think it represents a journey and a commitment to overcoming, and we're in that environment right now. So I Will Survive.
I Will Survive. And you, Siobhan?
Can I request a song? The song that I would request is I Can by Nas. I love this song. I know I can be what I want to be. I love that song. So whenever I'm feeling discouraged, I play that song. I Can by Nas.
I Can by Nas. Put that in the chat for us. And then final one. I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Nia. Final one, Prince or Michael Jackson?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, but I would have to say Prince.
Prince. All right.
Well, I love his swagger. I loved his, and the fact that he's the man of the hour from Minnesota. And for now, absolutely.
Okay. Yes. Finally, Siobhan.
I'll say Michael Jackson.
All right, we got both of those in the house right now. Okay, thank you all. I hope this has really helped you all get to know these ladies better. And now I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Nia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. And it's so important that we humanize the stories of our people when we talk about social justice and food justice, right? So before we dive into the topic, it's good to just humanize ourselves in this space because we all have a story that directly impacts, how we see this work and why were brought to this space. So thank you so much for starting us off with that. So I'm going to start with you, Thomasina. If you can tell us more about the Black Girls Grow YouTube channel and what inspired you to make that huge career change to start that project.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, Nia, what is a lawyer doing in the garden space? And I would have to say that it's something that my family has always done, the women in my family and in my community. And it's where I learned valuable life lessons about commitment and planning and prevailing. When I first heard things about what the women in our community were doing to advance social justice and to champion democracy, funny thing, I didn't realize it at that point, but it was in the garden. Of course, my mother and my grandmother and her Aunt Coot weren't reciting the 14th Amendment or the 15th Amendment as they were planting okra or picking snap beans or tilling a row. But they were talking about Miss Georgia's son, who had been arrested for violating the segregation laws there in Montgomery by taking a shortcut through the city public park, which was 1/2 block from my house. Or Miss Johnny Carr's son, Arlen Carr, who in 1968, good 13 years after Brown versus Board of Education, was integrating the schools of Montgomery. Or the legacy of Miss Rosa Parks, who taught Sunday school at the church my family attended, and whose family occupied the pew who owned the pew right in front of my family. So all the women knew each other. And in addition to being movement women and focused on social justice, and yes, they gardened. And so I guess you could say that my journey to becoming a lawyer and being a lawyer was heavily informed by the growing in the garden alongside these women. And there was one other woman, if I could just take a point of privilege, who bears mentioning, and that's a woman by the name of Catherine Coleman. She's gained national recognition now. She's from a little community down near my home. She's focused on clean water and sanitation and that part of the sustainable development goals. But then there's one other woman who was just the prime influencer for me to become a gardener. And this is a woman, Fannie Lou Hamer. I mentioned her earlier. She was a farmer down there in Mississippi. And a lot of us know her for her political prowess in demanding voting rights, even before the Selma to Montgomery March. But she was one of 20 children who grew up in a sharecropping family. And I fantasize that she picked the same purple hull peas that my family picked. She had a vision, not just of changing political landscapes, but of changing the economic landscape by establishing a means of food security for the many families like hers and like mine. So she started with 40 acres and it was a multifaceted self-help. I was happy to hear that comment this morning, where the only eligibility qualification was that you had to be poor. And she purchased latest 640 acres. And then she started a pig bank, which produced thousands of pigs to feed poor people. So that was my real inspiration to becoming a gardener, and then trying to look at Black Girls Grow and envision a way to plant seeds of empowerment for girls to see that regardless of where they start in life, they really are like mustard seeds that grow into the full abundance of life. And that's the inspiration.
I love it. I love it. And Fannie Lou Hamer reminds us, no one's free until everyone's free, right? So I love the inspiration. Yeah. Your story reminds me of my aunt who has since passed, but she was one of few Black women deans of an engineering school at a university. And she left that career to go into culinary arts. So, it's interesting to see how your story is paralleled in many ways, but having that representation in all of those industries and fields is so important for Black and brown girls for sure. Siobhan, first of all, go Bears. We're both Morgan alumni, so it's great to have a fellow Bear in the midst today. So your video highlighted a little bit about the intersection between food security, farming, and the Black church. Tell us a little bit more about that and why that intersection is critical and important to the Black community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our mission, the Black Church Food Security Network's mission, is to build community-based food systems that are anchored by the resources that's found within the Black community, specifically the Black church, and in partnership with Black farmers. We have identified that churches have like a plethora of resources that they can utilize and leverage for community food security. An example of an underutilized resource that a church has that could be used for food security is land. A lot of churches have underutilized parcels of land that they only use for church picnics, outings, back to school drives. So we are empowering churches to reimagine their underutilized resources and assets to increase food security. So land would be an example of one. Another example would be a church van or a church bus. You usually see them on the roads on Sunday mornings and after service on Sunday, picking members up and dropping them off. But what if that van could be transformed into a distribution truck or a distribution van, picking up produce from Black farmers and transporting it into churches, or serving as a Meals on Wheels? So putting meals, produce on that van and dropping them off to community residents. who do not own a car. And another example also would be a commercial kitchen. So a lot of churches have commercial kitchens or something close to a commercial kitchen, right? So those kitchens could be utilized for serving as incubator spaces for new caterers, new food makers, and different businesses related to that. And it can also be served as a demonstration site to teach community members how to properly prepare fresh foods. So I firmly believe that every church, regardless of the denomination, every house of worship has a place in advancing food security in their communities. But what we have to do is we have to take an assessment of our assets, our hard physical assets, as well as human assets within the congregation. Because usually when we think of ministry, we think of these very distinct, organized ministries within our congregations, such as the welcome committee, such as the choir, such as the deacons, such as the ushers, right? But we also have to expand that to really fit the needs of our community, such as establishing a community garden ministry, a health ministry in a church. So we are working with churches to find their unique calling of addressing food insecurity in their communities.
I love it. You mentioned that churches have a place in this work, right? I would say we have a responsibility, right, to make sure that our people are fed and to empower ourselves to use the skills and the assets that we have. And in this space of social justice work, we often focus on the deficiencies or what we don't have enough of or what the barriers are. And like you said, we don't spend enough time looking at the assets and the strengths of the people in communities, the resilience and the talents and the backgrounds that we all have to solve and address the issues that are faced by us, while looking at those systemic issues that we need to tackle as well. So I love hearing that story, and it reminds me of, or brings me to this next question. We all have different talents and strengths, right? Whether it's gardening, culinary arts and food preparation, safety, gardening, and all of those types of things. For those of us on the call today that want to learn more about how they can get involved to address issues related to food insecurity and how to support Black communities, Black and Brown communities, or marginalized communities more broadly, what recommendations would you have on where to start, how to learn more, who to connect with?
Wow. My footprint is relatively small in the sense that I do these YouTube episodes as a way of inspiring our young girls to get more involved. But I also think, and I'm listening to Siobhan on the template that's available through the churches. I think in working with schools, which I have begun to do, to establish community gardens on the land that is by the school systems. In terms of how to get involved, I think Siobhan has laid out a wonderful plan through your church, through organizations that are already occupying this space, not reinventing the wheel, but looking at how you can maybe do things in an additional way to be helpful. And you know, my focus is on inspiring girls to grow in the way that traditionally we have, but tapping into the resources of 4-H and other organizations that are available to provide intelligent resources for how to do that.
Well, thank you for the 4-H shout out. I'll take it.
Yeah, you know, the 4-H was not available to me when I was growing up. Everything was segregated, but you know, that is such a huge resource. So are Girl Scouts and, you know, other organizations that, you know, focus on, you know, sustainability. So
Right.
I think that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. In addition to 4-H, we have University of Maryland Extension, which we are part of. We have the Master Gardeners program. We have Junior Master Gardeners with 4-H. We have other urban agricultural literacy and rural agricultural literacy programs throughout the state. Every county and Baltimore City in Maryland has an extension and 4-H office. So that is certainly a resource that everyone should learn more about. Siobhan, what about you? What would you say is kind of the first step to learn more and build your connections?
Yeah, so I would say the first step is to study and to be in community. I think in this season where we are now in this pandemic, there has been an influx in charity, and especially around food giveaways and food charity in low income and in communities and in communities of color and in Black communities. And those resources and those programs haven't necessarily been mutually beneficial to those communities and haven't been building up the capacity in those communities to get through times of crisis. So I would say if you are called to serve, be in community with the area, the community, the residents, the people that you want to be in service with. Because back in the spirit of asset-based community development, we have the solutions in our community, but what we don't have is the resources to amplify those solutions because our communities are oversaturated with so many charity efforts that's diminishing our voice. So if you are called to serve, be in community, add value to the work that they're doing. And also like bring your unique talent to the table as an extension of what they're doing. And also just learn the history of food sovereignty, food charity, and their communities.
I love it. Something that you just said that resonated with me. We have the answers, we need the capacity, right? And too often organizations come into a community wanting to solve a problem for the community instead of finding out how they can amplify, like you said, what they already know, right? What they already know the answers are and how to address the issues themselves. They just need the capacity to do so because of the system level barriers that have been in place within their community. So I love that. Siobhan, there's a stigma in the Black community and Thomasina related to farming, right? In the Black community, lots of it is deeply rooted back to American slavery and our history and story connected to agriculture in this country. So why are you passionate about supporting Black farmers in relationship with food systems, and how can we change the narrative so that people who look like us feel like this is a viable career path, that it's a necessary industry that we all deserve and are required to be a part of? Siobhan, let's start with you.
Okay, I can take that first. So my passion just comes from, I guess, my lineage and my ancestry. And like I mentioned before, I am from the Deep South and I come from a family of farmers. And my granddad actually was displaced from his land because of predatory lending from the baking industry. And that is a systemic issues that many Black farmers have experienced. Like in the 1920s, the Black community collectively owned 16 million acres of land. Today it's actually less than 1% of that. And that is because of systemic racism that has displaced us from our right to agriculture and from our right to define what our food system is for our families and our communities. So my passion really comes from that. Like I am reclaiming our ancestral right. Like I am reclaiming what was stolen from us and what was taken from us. So I actually have my master's in city planning and community development to do this, to help communities plan what their food systems look like and the potential of what that could look like. And another reason why our work is anchored within the Black church is because historically the Black church has always been an anchor and a hub of resource within Black communities across America, regardless of where that community is located. I am a graduate of 2 HBCUs, Morgan State University and Tuskegee University. And both of those institutions have ties from the church. If it wasn't someone from the church saying, let's come together and let's start a school for our community, we wouldn't have Morgan State University. If it wasn't for the church in Tuskegee, Alabama, to help Booker T. Washington hold classes while the students were building the bricks to build the campus, we wouldn't have a Tuskegee University. So we are getting back to what is near and dear to our hearts and what is true to our culture, and ensuring that our communities are reclaiming their right to agriculture. And that may look like anything. My hands are not in the soil, but I am a food system planner. That is one pathway of working in agriculture and in the food system, because the food system is large. There's food production, food processing, food distribution. Distribution. Oh my gosh, food distribution. There's also food aggregation. There's food waste and compost. So the food system is large, and any major, any background can fit in it.
I love it. And you talk about the diversity within the industry itself and our deep connections to how we got to where we are today. And it's important to say those names because they are often excluded from our stories when we learn about agriculture in the school systems and in community. We are deeply rooted, no pun intended, to the story of agriculture in our country, right? Thomasina, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think my origin is very similar to Siobhan's. We all have stories in our families. I'm from the Deep South. I'm from Alabama, and thanks for highlighting your connection to Tuskegee. So many of our Black farmers historically have lost land. I think the total may be as much as 2 million acres over the last 50 years. My family in Sweetwater, Alabama, had their land just taken away. And it was a recent governor who, when he was looking at the petitions of my family, realized this was a true injustice. And this is a governor in Alabama, and restored the land. But most of the farmers were not nearly so fortunate. So in terms of, I think, first of all, we need to know the history. We need to know that the proximity to land was a good one. The relationship historically to land was a very rewarding one. When I talk to my mother, who comes from a family of subsistence farmers in rural Alabama, she loves the land. She loves the land and what it produces, because but for the fact that they grew vegetables, a crop every year, they would not, and chickens, they would not have been able to survive. I know that there is a stigma attached to farming and to growing, and we've got to get beyond that. We've got to recognize that there is a lot of good history there. I was recently, a few years back, in a farm supply store, and I was picking up some tomato plants, and a Black farmer came over and he said, "What are you planning to do with that?" I said, "I plan to plant these." He said, "When do you plan to plant them?" I said, "Well, probably in the next week or so." He said, "Wrong answer." And then he gave me a whole education on the timing of tomatoes versus okra versus everything. And he says, "Well, why don't you come out to where we farm and see what we're growing there?" And from that point on, I would regularly bring a chair. I'd pull it up, and I would feast at the knowledge and the wisdom that he had about growing. And I think making those intergenerational connections is very, very important, because from him I learned, not only the techniques, I also learned, I witnessed firsthand the continuing dignity of people who have that relationship with the land. So, I think we start with your question was, I think we start with developing relationships and seeing people as people, and farmers as our Black farmers as keepers of the flame for how to address food insecurity in our communities. And find ways to spotlight them and highlight them and to learn from them and to connect them with school children who all across this country, certainly in Maryland, we're finding gardens in schools and promoting growing both for the horticultural value and the science value and the appreciation of Mother Earth value. But it also is a platform to connect generations to the art of growing and our history.
I love it. Both of your responses reminded me of a show on OWN, speaking of Oprah Winfrey, Queen Sugar. Have you guys seen that show? Yeah.
Yes.
They talk, yeah, you have to watch it, Siobhan, but it's on OWN and it's produced by Oprah Winfrey and Ava DuVernay. But they talk about the, the premise of the story focuses a lot on Black agriculture in Louisiana, St. Joe's in Louisiana. But they talk a lot about the history of land being taken away and that whole story and the stigma of agriculture, not only for Black farmers, but for Black women farmers in particularly. And then the ownership of who, once you grow your own produce, who packages it, who refines it, who owns all of those things and benefits off of your labor. So it's a great show, that highlights lots of what you all are talking about today. And going back to extension, extension was once segregated, as many of our institutions were, and we do have extension programs on our HBCU campuses as well across the country. But we had, what we called at that time Negro extension educators or agents that focused on working directly with farmers. And we have to bring those connections back together because too often we are not engaging with people of color who are in the agricultural industry because they might have their own support network and we might not know how to connect, right? And we have more work to do from the university side so that we are doing, like Siobhan said, working alongside community and not bringing university into community, but working alongside to solve problems together. So I love both of your stories and insights.
And we really should, for those of us who approach this from a more global or a policy point of view, we should try to figure out a way to bring Black farmers into the mainstream. I spend every Saturday at farmers markets from spring to summer, to fall, and rarely do I see Black farmers there. Where are our Black farmers? And I say that from the point of view of kids being able to connect with Black farmers. That's an easy way. You go to the market, you're connecting with fresh food and whole food, but who do you see? That's very important. To answer your question, Mia, this is an opportunity. It would be an opportunity for us to begin to appreciate the value of growing food if our kids, our young people could see that there are Black farmers, know that food doesn't come just from the grocery store and that the people who grow it look like them.
Right. I love it. Yeah. So we did have a question in the chat around the national reach of the Black church.
Dropped Nia for just a minute. She was saying that the link that Siobhan had shared is in the chat. And we are also looking at the other questions that have come up. That was a question specifically around connecting Black farmers to Black churches. And so Siobhan has placed that link there. We have also had a question about, are there ways to connect Black farms and farmers to local regional farmer markets or outlets like that to create a more cultural, racial diversity and connections? Thomasina or Siobhan, would you be able to respond to that question?
Well, I'll defer to Siobhan on that.
Okay, I can take that question. So we have 3 programs within our organization to do that, to connect Black farmers to farmers markets and just niche markets in general. So our first program is our, well, 2 programs. So we have the Soil to Sanctuary Market, and that's where we transform like parking lots, open spaces, dining halls into mini farmers markets. And we bring in Black farmers and Black food makers for them to come in and sell their produce directly to the community through the interface of the church. And our second program is one that we just established in September of last year, and it's called our Black Church Supported Agriculture Program. And that is where we buy bulk from Black farmers and we resell those items to churches so they can distribute to the community. Because a lot of churches in the midst of this pandemic has established food pantries, food distributions, and food giveaways. So we want to make sure that Black farmers are included in this niche market that was created as a result of this pandemic. And also, I do want to say, like, back to studying the food system, you will know that Black farmers are under-resourced. So in regards to connecting Black farmers to those markets, we also have to have conversations about building up the capacity of Black-owned farms, adding staff, adding business trainings, different technical assistant resources. So when these markets are made available and these bulk orders are made, they are able to sustain this ordering in order to grow their business. And it's not adding unnecessary pressure to their business.
I love it. We must be talking about some powerful stuff because the internet keeps kicking me out, and that never happens where I am. So we must be talking about some powerful things here. So we're coming to close to the end of our time. I don't see any additional questions in the chat, although someone did share a great resource in the chat around Cultivate Charlottesville. So that's great to share those resources with one another. Oh, and there is one question. As educators of students who do not have people in their lives that are knowledgeable about farming and growing, how do we scratch the surface? How do we help students explore a totally foreign field that may intimidate them? And I'll quickly start and then turn it over to our panelists that we do have youth development curriculum in 4-H around agricultural literacy, how food is grown, nutritional value, food preparation. So I encourage you to reach out to your local 4-H office. A quick Google will help you find that, to ask about their ag literacy related curriculum and programs. And that's one resource. Siobhan, do you have other thoughts in mind?
Yes, I would say start where you are. If you are a teacher, then have a project with the students where they will save their apple skulls, their seeds from their lunch. And you can actually cut up a water bottle, put a hole in it, and have this serve as a starter tray. So we have videos on how to start where you are on our YouTube page, and I would drop the link for that in the chat box.
Awesome. Thomasina, what ideas do you have? How can we start?
Well, I would say, look at my YouTube channel, because one of the things that I'm trying to do is exactly what Siobhan just said, is to reach young people where they are. And if I grow 300 plants a year, well, that's not doable for a lot of folks. But what they can do is just take, like you say, a bottle and begin. And I just want to show you a tray. This is very easy. Here are beans that I started 2 weeks ago in a tray. And these are beans that will go in the garden. Or if you've got a pot, you don't have a garden, then start to do that. Start to learn about the germination of seeds, to study. And I think a great place is for schools to be lobby the schools to be more aggressive about starting gardens. I'm going to be working with a couple of organizations in about a week to establish and to enhance gardens at schools, where they can be connected to the science department, the teachers can support the effort, and the communities can come in and begin the real work of educating our kids about food and where it comes from.
That's great to hear. And I will say, to your point about the school systems and lobbying, some school systems have agricultural literacy education interwoven in the classrooms, but some schools have removed them in recent years. So I do encourage you to reach out to your local school systems, the superintendents, your principals, to find out if they teach agricultural literacy in the classroom. And if they don't, ask why, and advocate for that to happen within the classroom. It should be a part of our educational system as well. So the last question in the chat was, where can you learn more about Black Food Matters or Black farming and agricultural stories? So Siobhan shared a resource in the chat, Black Food Matters and Black Food Geographies by Asante Reese, and Freedom Farmers by Dr. Monica White are two books that she recommends. Did you want to say anything else on that, Siobhan?
That's it. And then if you are looking to grow and get started, I would actually recommend Leah Penniman's book. And the name is escaping me at this moment, but I'll Google the name and put it in the chat box.
Awesome. And there's other folks sharing their wealth of resources in the chat as well. Farming While Black is another one. Soul Street is a community market that showcases Black-owned businesses, artists, food, farmers, and entertainment in the Frederick area. So lots of great resources. And then Michael Twitty's The Cooking Gene is incredible as well. So keep those resources coming. Well, I want to thank you all so much for sharing your wisdom, sharing your stories, and sharing your perspectives with us. I'm going to turn it over to our host, Katrina, to kind of wrap us up for the afternoon and share what's coming next.
Thank you very much. So on behalf of the Mayo staff, the Board of Directors and Advisory Council, we thank Dr. Mamie Parker for setting the tone for the day's event, our moderator, Dr. Nia Imani Fields, and our very inspirational and informative guests, Thomasina Rogers and Siobhan Terrell. And thanks to each of you for your patience as we had to work through our technical difficulties this morning, and for spending your valuable time with us. And many of you are probably on your lunch break. This symposium was recorded, so it will be available later if you join late. And we hope that you will join us for part 2 of our series next Wednesday at the same time, when our topic will be accessibility, mental health, and disabilities. So please tell a friend and enjoy your Earth Day tomorrow. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.